monster we fear most is not the demon. It is the kind neighbor, the smiling colleague, the good student. It is the ordinary man. Lucifer was the brightest angel before his fall. The Lucifer Effect is not the story of how bad people do bad things. It is the much more terrifying story of how good people are seduced, pressured, and transformed into doing them. This is not a story about them. It is a warning about us. To understand this transformation, we must abandon the comfortable lie that evil is an innate quality. The idea that the world is divided between rotten apples and good apples is a fairy tale we tell ourselves to be able to sleep at night. It allows us to draw a clear line in the sand between us and the monster. Dark psychology blurs that line, proposes a much more terrifying truth, that evil is not in the apple, but in the barrel. That wickedness is, in most cases, a situational creation. It is the result of a system, a role, an order. It is a fungus that grows in the darkness of obedience, anonymity, and power. And to understand the architecture of this rotten barrel, we must travel to the basement of Stanford University in the summer of 1971. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo wanted to conduct a simple study on the psychology of prison life. He published an advertisement in the local newspaper. Volunteer men wanted for a psychological study of prison life. $15 a day. More than 70 people responded. Zimbardo and his team conducted personality tests and selected the 24 most normal. They were the epitome of the good, peaceful, intelligent college students from middle-class backgrounds with no criminal records or psychological problems. Essentially, they were good apples, chosen for their mental health. And then, the construction of the barrel began. The basement of the psychology department was turned into a simulated prison. Zimbardo flipped a coin. Half of the students were randomly assigned as prisoners, the other half as guards. On Sunday morning, the real police of Palo Alto, as part of the experiment, raided the prisoners' houses, arrested them for armed robbery, fingerprinted them, and took them to the basement. Here, the transformation began. The first weapon of the Lucifer Effect. De-individuation. The prisoners' clothes were taken away, they were sprayed with a disinfectant spray, and they were forced to wear a rough gown, without underwear. A light chain was placed on their ankle, a constant reminder of their imprisonment. And most importantly, their heads were covered with a stocking cap, simulating a shaved head. But the masterstroke of de-individuation was the elimination of their names. They were no longer John or David. They were Prisoner 819 or Prisoner 416. Their identities, their individuality, had been erased. The guards were given a different uniform, but equally powerful. Khaki-colored suits, a whistle around the neck, and a wooden baton, a symbol of power. But the most crucial element was the mirrored sunglasses. This was not a fashion detail. It was a psychological weapon. The glasses prevented any eye contact. They turned the guard into an anonymous and impenetrable entity. It was easier to be cruel when you couldn't see the eyes of the man you were tormenting, and he couldn't see yours. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. It got out of control within hours. On the second day, the prisoners attempted a rebellion. They barricaded themselves in their cells, took off their hats, and tore off their numbers. The guards' response was quick, brutal, and most importantly, creative. They were not told what to do. They improvised. They emptied fire extinguishers over the prisoners. They stormed the cells, stripped the prisoners, took away their beds, and placed the ringleaders in solitary confinement. A dark, tiny closet called the Hole. This is where the system took over them. The guards, these pacifist students, began to enjoy their power. One of them, a student named Dave Eshelman, adopted the character of John Wayne, a sadistic prison guard from a movie. It wasn't him. He was playing a role, and the role gave him permission to be a monster. He would wake up in the middle of the night to blow his whistle and force the prisoners to do push-ups, sometimes standing on their backs. He created forms of psychological torture. He forced the prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands. He made them sing stupid songs. He turned them into his toys, and the prisoners collapsed. They accepted their role as victims. They became servile, depressed. Prisoner 8612 suffered an acute mental breakdown in less than 36 hours, screaming with rage and terror. He had to be released. But the darkest part of the Lucifer Effect was not what happened to the students. It was what happened to the creator. Philip Zimbardo was not observing the experiment from behind a glass. He assigned himself the role of prison superintendent. And the role swallowed him. When the prisoners' parents called, worried, Zimbardo treated them with hostility. When his own colleagues questioned the ethics, he saw them as a threat to his prison. He had become part of the system. He had been corrupted by his own power. The barrel had consumed its creator. The experiment, scheduled for 14 days, had to be abruptly canceled after only 6. Stanford taught us a frightening lesson. You don't have to be a wicked person to do evil. You only need a role that gives you permission, a uniform that hides your face, and a system that approves your cruelty. But what if you don't even have a position of power? What if your only role is that of a follower? Before Zimbardo built his prison in a basement, another psychologist at Yale had explored the root of Lucifer's fall: obedience. Stanley Milgram was obsessed with the Holocaust. Like many, he couldn't understand how a civilized nation, the nation of Beethoven and Goethe, could participate in industrialized genocide. And he found the most common and chilling answer of all, one that was heard again and again in the Nuremberg trials. I was just following orders. Milgram decided to test that excuse. The experiment was a masterful deception. Volunteers were recruited for a study on memory and learning. Each volunteer was assigned the role of teacher. In another room, out of sight, there was a student, an actor, strapped to a chair. The teacher's task was to read a list of words. If the student made a mistake, the teacher had to administer an electric shock. With each mistake, the voltage increased from 15 volts, slight shock, to 450 volts, a zone marked with the ominous letters XXX and danger, severe shock. The student, the actor, followed a script. At 75 volts, he growled. At 120, he shouted that it hurt. At 150, he demanded to leave the experiment. At 330, he stopped responding, falling into ominous silence. In the room with the teacher, there was only one observer, a scientist in a lab coat, another uniform. As the teachers, the actual subjects, became nervous and wanted to stop, the scientist did not threaten them. He simply deployed his verbal stings in a calculated escalation. First, a simple request. Please continue. If the subject hesitated, he appealed to science. The experiment requires that you continue. If the subject continued resisting, the request became an order. It is absolutely essential that you continue. And if all else failed, total nullification of will was reached. You have no other choice. You must continue. The psychological conflict was devastating. The subjects sweated, trembled, bit their lips. Many laughed hysterically, a reaction of pure stress. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They could hear the screams of pain. And yet, they continued. Before the experiment, Milgram surveyed his colleagues. They predicted that only 1%, the psychopathic range, would go all the way. The result? 65% of people. 2 out of 3 ordinary citizens administered the final shock of 450 volts to a man screaming for his life, simply because a man in a lab coat told them it was essential. Milgram had discovered the engine of genocide. It is not hatred, it is deference. It is the human psyche's capacity to diffuse responsibility, to hand over one's own conscience to an authority figure, transforming oneself from a moral agent into a mere instrument. And this leads us directly to the banality of evil. The philosopher Hannah Arendt covered the trial of Adolf Eichmann, the logistical architect of the Holocaust. She expected to find a monster, a sadist, a Mephistopheles. She found none of that. What he found was a nobody, an efficient bureaucrat, a mediocre man whose only notable skill was organization. Eichmann did not hate the Jews. They were irrelevant to him. He was obsessed with train schedules, quotas, and the efficiency of his extermination system. He took pride in doing his job well. Eichmann was the subject of Milgram, who went all the way to the end. His sin was not sadism. His sin was obedience. It was the inability to think from the perspective of the other. It was the total abdication of personal morality in favor of the system's rules. Milgram and Eichmann demonstrate that the worst evil in the world is not committed by sadists who rebel against the system, but by obedient individuals who serve the system without question. We already have two parts of the barrel: a system that assigns roles, Stanford, and an authority that gives orders, Milgram. Only the third ingredient remains, the catalyst that makes everything explode, the group. Individual morality is a fragile barrier. Group morality is an unstoppable force. When humans act alone, responsibility is a heavy backpack on their shoulders. When they act as a group, that backpack disappears, dissolved in the mafia mentality. Groupthink is not just agreement. It is a psychological state where the desire for harmony and conformity within the group overrides realistic evaluation of alternatives. Dissent becomes impossible. Doubt becomes betrayal. And for the mafia to function, it needs a goal, and that goal must be dehumanized. Dehumanization is the process of turning off empathy. It is the act of convincing oneself that the other, the prisoner, the Jew, the enemy, is not like you. It is an animal, a plague, a number, a concept. And once empathy is turned off, any atrocity can be committed. There is no darker example of this in the history of the United States than the lynchings in the South. Let's look at the photographs of the time. They are the most terrifying document of the Lucifer Effect. We see hundreds of people. They are not monsters in white robes at night. They are the entire city in broad daylight. They are good men, fathers, church deacons, shopkeepers, farmers. They are smiling. They gather to commit unimaginable acts of torture and murder. They watch as a man is castrated, burned alive, and dismembered. And then they pose for the photos. They pose with their young children, as if they were on a picnic. These photos became postcards. Postcards sent by mail with messages like, "Here we are, at the barbecue. How is this possible?" Because the group gave them permission. The victim had been dehumanized by the racist ideology of the barrel they lived in. And the group, acting as a single entity, created a new temporary morality where sadism was not a sin. It was an act of community justice. No one felt responsible because everyone was responsible. This mechanism has not disappeared. It has simply changed technology. Let us consider the modern digital mob. Cancellation. Doxing. The mafia mentality is now global and instantaneous. An anonymous individual, the new uniform, the new mirrored glasses, finds an old tweet. The victim is dehumanized, reduced to racist, fascist, transphobic. The group forms within minutes. Individual responsibility dissolves. People who, in real life, are kind, decent, and good join in verbal lynching. They send death threats. They try to destroy that person's professional life. They enjoy the act of destruction because they do it from the safety of the tribe. They feel virtuous doing it. It is the same mechanism of lynching, only with retweets instead of ropes. The Lucifer Effect in action, every day, in our pockets. But what happens when these three elements, the system, authority, and group, come together in the real world, under maximum pressure? Zimbardo's and Milgram's experiments were criticized for being artificial. But in 2003, in the darkness of a military prison in Iraq, the Lucifer Effect had its most terrifying graduation. Welcome to Abu Ghraib. The scene was a perfect rotten barrel, a chaotic prison in a war zone. The guards were reserve soldiers from the military police, young, poorly trained, and unsupervised. The prisoners were the enemy, terrorists, insurgents, the embodiment of dehumanization. And the authority, military intelligence implicitly pressured the guards to soften the prisoners for interrogations. All the pieces were in place, and the outcome was exactly what Zimbardo would have predicted. The world saw the photographs. Naked prisoners, hooded, stacked in human pyramids, men forced to simulate sexual acts. And at the center of it all, the smile of soldier Lindy England. The image is infamous. England, a 21-year-old young woman from a small town in West Virginia, holding a leash tied to the neck of a naked Iraqi prisoner, who is on all fours, like a dog. She smiles at the camera and raises her thumb. Was Lindy England a psychopath? A rotten apple? No. Her history showed her as a shy woman, a supermarket worker who joined the army to pay for college. Lindy England was the John Wayne of Stanford made real. She was an ordinary person, given absolute power over dehumanized beings in a ruleless system with the tacit approval of authority. The barrel not only gave her permission to be cruel, it encouraged her to be so. Her smile is not that of a sadist. It is that of someone posing for a fraternity photo, someone whose moral compass has been so shattered by the system that she no longer knows right from wrong. Philip Zimbardo himself was called to testify as an expert in the defense of one of the guards. He saw his experiment recreated with absolute horror. He wrote, "It wasn't just a few rotten apples. The barrel was rotten. The system had created the monsters it needed. We have seen the Lucifer Effect in the laboratory, in history, and in war. It is easy again to draw a line. I would never be at Stanford. I am not a soldier in a war zone. But the barrel is not always a prison. Sometimes the barrel is an office. Sometimes it is a house. The descent into hell is not always a dramatic plunge. Sometimes it is a series of small concessions, small abuses of power. The intimate Lucifer effect is around us. Let's take on the role of father. A good man loves his family, but he becomes a father. Suddenly, the system changes. There is stress, sleep deprivation, a crying baby that does not respond to logic. He is given a new role, the one who imposes discipline. And one night, at 3 a.m., after hours of crying, the good man finds himself shouting at the baby, a defenseless being. He feels a wave of rage he does not recognize. For a second, the father disappears and the prison guard emerges, frustrated by the lack of control. The stress system and the role of power have created a microfall, or consider the most common example. The little tyrant in the office. A colleague is your friend. They joke, have lunch together. One day, that colleague gets a small promotion. They become team leader. They are given a new uniform, perhaps not literal, but a new title, a new cubicle. And slowly, they transform. The corporate hierarchy system is the barrel. The system rewards efficiency, cruelty, and punishes weakness, friendship. The new boss begins to speak in corporate jargon. He starts timing breaks. He begins to assign the dirty work to those he dislikes. It's not that he has become bad. It's that he is playing the role he believes the system demands. The role of boss has consumed him. He is acting like a John Wayne in a suit, not because he is a sadist, but because the system has given him permission, and he is too weak to resist. If the cage is so powerful, if the system, authority, and group are such overwhelming forces, are we all doomed to fall? Is there no escape? There is, but the escape is not what we think. The hero exists, but the hero, in the psychology of the Lucifer effect, is not the strongest, nor the smartest, nor the purest. The hero is not a Superman. The hero is simply the dissident. Let's look again at the experiments. In Milgram's study, although 65% obeyed until the end, there was a 35% who did not. A 35% who, at some point, regardless of the scientist's orders, looked at the lab coat and said no. These were the heroes, those who, despite the immense situational pressure, refused to spread their responsibility. They accepted the uncomfortable social conflict of disobedience to maintain their own moral compass. They refused to become an instrument. And the clearest case of heroism as dissent occurred at Stanford. The experiment was not stopped by the guards, nor by the prisoners, not even by Zimbardo himself, who was blind to his own power. He was detained by someone outside the system. Christina Maslach, a trained psychologist and future wife of Zimbardo, went down to the basement to conduct interviews. What she saw horrified her. She did not see an experiment. She saw a group of boys tormenting other boys while their boyfriend took notes. That night, she confronted Zimbardo. She told him, "What you are doing is terrible. You are allowing those boys to be cruel. You have become a monster." She was the only person who was not seduced by the power of the scientific experiment role. She was the dissenter. Her tears and her moral accusation were the shock that finally awakened Zimbardo from his own self-corruption. He saw the prison for the first time through her eyes. The next morning, he canceled the experiment. Heroism, therefore, is not an act of strength. It is an act of social independence. It is the ability to be the only voice in the room saying, "This is wrong," knowing that the group will turn against you. It is the will to be unpopular, to be the party pooper, to be the dissenter. And so, we arrive at Lucifer's mirror. The line between good and evil is not a fixed, impermeable wall that separates good people from bad people. It is a permeable line. It is a blurry line that is constantly redrawn, not because of who we are, but because of the situation we find ourselves in. Evil is nothing more than the glorification of power, blind obedience, dehumanization of others, and conformity to the group. The Lucifer Effect is the formula that turns human decency into efficient cruelty. Heroism, therefore, is not strength, nor perfect virtue. Heroism is dissent. It is personal responsibility. It is the ability to see the barrel for what it is and to refuse to rot with it. In the end, the most important question that dark psychology leaves us is, am I a good person? That is an easy question, a question we ask in the comfort of our security. The real question, the terrifying question, is, what system, what uniform, what order would be needed for my goodness to become irrelevant?